Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something a little different. Usually, we're looking forward at AI or space travel, the future of work. But today, we are looking backward.
Way backward.
We have a stack of research here that is going to just dismantle something you probably believe is a stone-cold fact. We're going on a bit of a linguistic treasure hunt.
It really is a bit of a detective story, isn't it? It's about how history gets written.
Yeah.
And then how it gets rewritten when someone actually bothers to, check the receipts.
Exactly. We're talking about the word gameplay.
Gameplay.
If you're listening to this, you know the word, you use it, you hear it in reviews. The graphics are great, but the gameplay is repetitive. Or that loop has addictive gameplay.
Right.
It's the core noun we use to describe the interactive experience of a video game. It feels fundamental.
It's one of those words that feels native to the medium.
Mm.
Like pencil or joystick or
Cartridge.
Cartridge, yeah. It feels like it was born in an arcade, surrounded by neon lights and, cigarette smoke.
And that is exactly where the trouble starts. Because if I asked you, or even if I asked a game historian, say 10 years ago, where did the word gameplay come from? Yeah. What's the standard answer? What's the common wisdom?
Oh, the story is incredibly consistent. You find it in books, you find it in academic papers. Until recently, it was the gospel truth on Wikipedia.
Okay.
The story goes that in the golden age of arcades, we're talking the 1970s and early 80s, manufacturers like Atari or Midway printed instructions on the cabinet glass or the bezel. And supposedly, the header for these instructions was a very specific question: how the game plays.
How the game plays? I mean, it sounds plausible.
It does. And the theory is that players and developers they shortened it. They mashed it together because it was faster to say.
Right.
How the game plays became gameplay, which eventually fused into the single word gameplay. It's a beautiful, logical origin story.
It is elegant. It ties the language directly to the hardware. It suggests that the word evolved organically from the machines themselves. But our mission today is to walk through a fascinating piece of research by a scholar named Quentin Alvarez, and his paper has this massive title.
It's a real mouthful of a title.
It is. It's the emergence of the term gameplay in the English-speaking and French-speaking video game culture sphere in the 20th century.
But the content it's kind of explosive for anyone who cares about gaming history or just, the history of words.
Because Alvarez implies that this how the game plays story isn't just a mistake, it is a complete fabrication, a myth.
Exactly. Alvarez didn't just take the Wikipedia entry at face value. He performed a deep lexicometric analysis. He went back to primary sources, thousands of them, to find the truth. And what he found takes us from a mysterious Wikipedia editor to 19th century chess matches and, weirdly enough, to a jazz saxophone player in France.
The saxophone player is my absolute favorite part of this, and we will definitely get there. But let's start with the crime scene. Let's look at the myth itself. Alvarez started digging into how the game plays theory actually came from. Because for a fact, to be cited in academic literature and journalism, it has to have a source, right? You can't just pull it out of thin air.
You would hope so. Alvarez started his investigation on the French Wikipedia page for gameplay.
Right.
He noticed that this specific anecdote about the arcade cabinets was everywhere, but he couldn't find a photo of a cabinet that actually had that sticker. He couldn't find a manual that used that header. So he did what any good digital detective does. He checked the edit history.
The View History tab, the most underappreciated tool on the internet. It's like looking at the DNA of an article.
Totally. And he scrolled all the way back to December 17, 2005. A user logs in. Their username is Suppelin.
Suppelin, just an anonymous handle.
Just a handle. And for context, Suppelin it's a genericized trademark for paper towels in France. So it's like a username Kleenex or paper towel.
So a username paper towel.
Yeah, and this user edits a page to say, and I'm paraphrasing the French here, that the term designates the manner in which the game is played, coming from the title of employment sheets on Anglo-Saxon arcade kiosks. How the game plays, of which gameplay is the abbreviation.
Okay, so Suppelin types this in. Did they link to a manual? Did they upload a grainy photo of a Pac-Man cabinet with that text?
0 citations.
Yeah.
Nothing. They just typed it into the void, hit save, and walked away.
And somehow that's stuck. A random user named Paper Towel types a sentence and it becomes history.
It didn't just stick. It metastasized. Alvarez tracked the spread of this edit. For nearly 15 years, this unsourced claim from a random user became the foundational truth.
Wow.
Journalists started repeating it because it sounded right. Then researchers cited the journalists, then books cited the researchers. It's a perfect example of a circular citation loop.
That is genuinely terrifying when you think about it. It shows how fragile common knowledge really is in the digital age. We assume that if something is in a published book on gaming history, it's been vetted. But in this case, the root node was just Sopalin.
It's the truthiness factor. It sounded plausible. It fit the narrative of the scrappy, low-tech arcade era, so nobody bothered to check the primary source.
Everyone just assumed someone else had checked it.
Exactly.
But Alvarez did check, and I want to get into his methodology because he didn't just Google it. He used something called lexicometry. For those listening who might not be linguists, can we break down what that actually entails? It sounds intense.
It is intense. Lexicometry is essentially the statistical analysis of vocabulary in a corpus of text.
Good.
Alvarez couldn't just read a few magazines. He had to build a massive database, a corpus of over 1,800 documents. We're talking about magazines, instruction manuals, patents, dictionaries.
Wow.
His data set spanned from 1864 all the way to 1994.
That is a huge range. And I imagine this wasn't all neatly digitized and searchable in a nice PDF format.
Not at all. He used OCR optical character recognition to scan a lot of it. But OCR is notoriously glitchy with old fonts or faded paper, especially from the 19th or early 20th century. So Alvarez had to do a massive amount of manual verification. He calls it grunt work in the paper.
Right.
He had to physically look at thousands of pages to make sure the computer wasn't misreading game player as gameplay or game playfield.
Because if you're trying to pinpoint the exact moment a word was invented, a false positive ruins the data. If the computer thinks it sees gameplay in 1950, but it really says game player, your whole theory is shot.
Precisely. He had to be surgical about it. This wasn't a casual Google search. This was forensic linguistics.
So he's armed with this massive database, and his first big test is to verify the Sopalin claim. If the word came from arcade cabinets in the 70s asking how the game plays, there should be physical evidence.
Right. There were thousands of these machines made. So he focused on the golden age of arcades, roughly 1971 to 1984. He reasoned that if this phrase was common enough to spawn a new noun that we use globally today, it should be hard to find one cabinet that says it.
Oh.
He struck out completely. He searched the instructions for all the major hits. Pac-Man, Space Invaders, Pong, Defender, none of them say how the game plays.
Okay, but what about the very beginning? Alvarez looked at computer space, right? That was 1971. Nolan Bushnell, the first industrial arcade game. If it started anywhere, it would start there.
This is where it gets nuanced and where a lesser researcher might have gotten confused. He checked the manual for computer space, and he actually did find the words gameplay.
Wait, so Sopalin was right. The words were there.
No, and this is the crucial distinction. The manual uses gameplay as two separate words. The sentence reads, sound is on only during gameplay.
During gameplay. So it's describing a state of time, like during lunch or during operation.
Exactly. It wasn't answering a question like how the game plays. It was a technical term describing the state of the machine when a coin had been inserted and the logic board was active.
Okay, so that's huge.
It's a smoking gun. It proves that the two-word term gameplay already existed and was in technical use. It wasn't an abbreviation of a sticker question. The engineers were using standard English to describe the machine's state.
That completely dismantles the how the game plays theory. The words were already there, just being used differently. It wasn't some user slang that evolved. It was technical jargon.
And Alvarez didn't stop there. He wanted to be absolutely sure. He went back to the ancestors of the arcade cabinet, the mechanical game.
Pinball and all that?
Exactly. The pinball machines and bagatelle tables of the late 19th century. Because if arcade culture invented this term, maybe it came from the mechanical era.
I love that he went back this far. We usually think of gaming history starting with Pong, but there's a whole lineage of coin-op machines before screens.
Oh, yeah. He looked at the 1871 Redgrave Parlor Bagatelle. He checked the rule sheet. Did it ask how the game plays? No. It said rules of game.
Rules of game.
He checked dozens of others. They all said instructions or directions or rules. The phrase how the game plays simply does not appear in the historical record of arcade machines.
So Palin made it up. Or maybe they misremembered something they saw once and generalized it to the whole industry, but effectively the arcade origin story is dead.
It's dead. But that leaves a vacuum. If the arcades didn't invent the word gameplay, who did? Because we definitely use it today. It had to come from somewhere.
This is where Alvarez's time machine really kicks into gear. He found the term way before 1971.
Much further back.
All right.
And here we have to separate the two versions of the word. There's gameplay, 2 words,
Right.
and gameplay, 1 solid noun. Let's start with the 2-word version.
Alvarez tracks this to 1864. That's Civil War era. Lincoln was president. What kind of gameplay are we talking about here? There were no joysticks in 1864.
No joysticks.
Hmm.
But there were pawns. He found it in the Chess Players magazine. There's a commentary on a match that reads, and the grammar is a bit Victorian, white having a 1 gameplay as black may.
White having a 1 gameplay as black may. Let me parse that. It means white has effectively won the game, regardless of how black chooses to play.
Correct. But look at the construction. Play is the verb. Game is the object. But they're sitting right next to each other. It establishes the concept of gameplay as the strategic agency of the participants.
So the flow of the match.
Exactly. The flow of the match.
So the concept of describing the action of a game as gameplay is over 150 years old. Nolan Bushnell didn't invent it for computer space. He was just using the English language as it had existed for a century.
Exactly. It was standard English. But the real surprise is the modern one-word gameplay. That feels like a tech word, right? Like database or online. You assume it needs the computer age to exist. Merging 2 words into one usually implies a new, specific concept.
I would assume so, yeah. Usually you combine words when you need to describe something new and specific to a technology.
Alvarez found the one-word gameplay in a patent from 1916 for a game-playing piece. So that gets us the hyphen. But the most striking example comes from 1922 in a magazine called Radio.
Radio magazine. So absolutely nothing to do with games.
Nothing to do with games in the sense of winning or losing. It was a science and technology context. But think about what a radio is, especially in 1922. It's a system of interaction. You tune it, you adjust the signal, you fiddle with the crystals.
You're manipulating a system to get a desired result.
Exactly. And in that context, the word gameplay, 1 word, appeared there. Alvarez notes that throughout the early 20th century, the word popped up in texts about politics, religion, and management. It was a word floating in the ether, describing the dynamics of interaction long before video games co-opted it.
That is wild. We're so possessive of this word as gamers, we think it belongs to us. But it was actually being used by management consultants and radio technicians in the 1920s to describe how things work together.
It shows that the vocabulary for interacting with the system was being built long before the microchip. When video games arrived, they didn't need to invent a new language from scratch. They just reached out and grabbed words that were already sitting on the shelf.
So how did it actually become our word? If it was floating around in 1920s radio manuals, how did it end up in Electronic Gaming Monthly?
Alvarez credits the journalism of the early 1980s. Specifically, a writer named Phil Wiswell, who wrote for Video Review. In April 1981, Wiswell is one of the first people to use gameplay as 1 word to specifically critique the mechanics of a video game. He was writing about how color was becoming an integral part of the gameplay.
And Bill Kunkel was in that mix too, right? The game doctor.
Handbook of the field.
Yeah.
He wrote for Electronic Games. In the early 80s, Kunkel and his peers needed a vocabulary to distinguish between graphics, what it looks like, and interaction, what it feels like.
Right.
They started using gameplay and eventually solidified gameplay as the term of art.
So the press codified it. The arcade manufacturers used the 2-word technical term gameplay in their manuals, but the journalists mashed it into the 1-word noun gameplay to describe the fun factor.
That seems to be the path. It was an organic adoption by writers trying to describe a new medium, not an invention on a sticker.
Okay, so that solves the English side of the mystery. We have Victorian chess, 1920s radio, and 1980s journalists, but the investigation didn't stop at the English border.
No.
Alvarez also looked at how the word entered the French language. And honestly, this is the plot twist I did not see coming.
It is a bizarre cultural left turn. You have to remember, in the 70s and 80s, information didn't travel instantly. There was no Twitter. Just because American kids were saying gameplay in 1982 didn't mean French kids were.
Right. There's a lag.
Yeah.
And usually translation handles this. You'd expect the French magazines to translate gameplay into something like jouabilité.
And eventually they did. But Alvarez noticed a huge gap. English manuals were using gameplay in 1977. French journals didn't really start using the word until 1988.
And an 11-year delay.
That's an 11-year delay.
In the world of tech, 11 years is an eternity. That's the difference between an Atari 2600 and a Sega Genesis. What happened in 1988 to suddenly make the French adopt the word?
Alvarez pinpointed the exact catalyst. And it wasn't a game, it wasn't a review of Super Mario Bros. It was an advertisement in a magazine called Tilt, September 1988 issue.
Okay, paint the picture. What was the ad for? A new console? A revolutionary controller?
It was an ad for a music CD,
The CD.
Yes album to be specific,
Uh,
by an American saxophonist named Jim Cuomo.
I'm trying to process this. A jazz saxophonist is responsible for French gaming terminology.
It appears so. The album was titled, in big, bold letters, Gameplay, and the concept of the album was jazz covers of video game music. It had tracks from The Legend of Zelda, Super Mario, things like that.
So a French editor at a magazine sees this jazz CD called Gameplay featuring video game music and thinks, what? That sounds cool.
Essentially, yes. It introduced the term in a cultural context that was hip and modern. Alvarez found that before this ad appeared, the word was virtually absent in French media.
And after.
Immediately after the ad runs, between 1988 and 1990, the word gameplay suddenly floods magazines like Micromag and Player One.
It's like a viral infection. The saxophone player brought the virus.
It's just a unilateral influence. English concepts were flowing into French culture, and often the French writers would keep the English word franglais to sound more technical or in the know.
Right.
They saw gameplay on the CD cover, associated it with the cutting edge of digital entertainment, and adopted it.
That is hilarious. We spend so much time analyzing the etymology of words, looking for logical roots, and sometimes the answer is just, a guy saw a cool CD cover.
It highlights the randomness of language evolution. It's not always a straight line. Sometimes it's a chess match, sometimes it's a radio patent, and sometimes it's a Jim Cuomo jazz album. It really speaks to how pop culture bleeds across borders in unexpected ways.
It really changes how you look at the words we use. We assume they're these solid, immutable bricks of meaning, but they're more like accidents of history.
Absolutely. And I think that brings us back to the biggest takeaway from Alvarez's work. It's not just about the word gameplay. It's a warning about the digital age and how we process information.
You mean the Sopollen incident?
Right. Think about the power one anonymous person had. Snowballen, whoever they are, typed a sentence into Wikipedia in 2005. Maybe they believed it. Maybe they heard a rumor in an arcade once. But that one sentence became the academic truth for a decade and a half.
It's almost a case study in confirmation bias. The story about how the gameplay sticker sounded true. It fit our mental model of the gritty, low-tech arcade era, so nobody challenged it. We wanted it to be true.
It's the path of least resistance. Checking primary sources is hard work. Scanning 1,800 documents like Alvarez did is exhausting and takes months.
Yeah.
Copy-pasting a Wikipedia entry is easy. But this deep dive proves that real history is often messier and much more interesting than the convenient myths we tell ourselves.
It really is. I mean, the truth involves Civil War chess strategy and roaring 20s radio mechanics. That gives the word gameplay so much more weight and dignity than just being a typo on a Pac-Man cabinet.
It connects our modern digital hobby to a much longer history of human play. Gameplay isn't just about pixels. It's about the interaction between a human mind and a system, whether that system is a wooden board, a radio signal, or a 4K screen. It universalizes the experience.
It makes you wonder what else we're wrong about. What other facts about gaming history are just Wikipedia edits waiting to be debunked?
Oh, I guarantee you the history books are full of them. We just need more researchers like Alvarez to do the grunt work.
I want to leave our listeners with a thought to chew on. We throw around tech terms all the time. Bandwidth, interface, network, glitch. We assume these are modern words invented for our modern world.
But gameplay proved us wrong on that.
Exactly. So here is the provocation. If gameplay actually belongs to the 19th century, what other words are you using today thinking they're cutting edge, that were actually being muttered by guys in top hats and waistcoats 150 years ago?
That is a rabbit hole worth going down. I might go look up bug in computer after this.
Do it. You might find some surprises. Huge thanks to the research of Julian Alvarez for giving us this incredible story. And thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. Go check your sources, explore the history of your language, and we'll see you next time.